The air in Port Haven's town hall was thick with the scent of polished oak and sea salt, a fitting backdrop for the Seafarers' Gala, where the town's oldest families paraded their legacies under crystal chandeliers. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my navy dress clinging to my skin, feeling the weight of every gaze. My name is Eleanor Warren, 35, an archivist at the Port Haven Historical Society, where I've spent years piecing together the past to preserve our family's name. Tonight, that name was being torn from me. My father, the man who'd once called me his rock, stood at the podium, his silver hair catching the light, his new wife Celeste draped on his arm like a trophy. At 62, he still carried the broad-shouldered authority of a Warren, but his eyes refused to meet mine. After much reflection, he began, his voice steady as the tide, "I'm leaving the Warren estate, including the cliffside land, to my beloved Celeste, for her unwavering devotion." The words landed like a slap, sharp and public, the crowd's gasps echoing off the high ceiling. The cliffside land, acres of prime coastline, the jewel of Port Haven, worth millions to developers, was the heart of our family's legacy. And he'd given it to her. Celeste, radiant in a cream silk gown, smiled with the grace of a queen accepting a crown. Her fingers, manicured and gleaming, tightened on my father's arm, a silent claim to victory. The crowd murmured, some clapping, others stealing glances at me, expecting tears or a scene. I felt the sting of betrayal, not just from my father, but from the town that watched, waiting for me to crumble. I'd spent my life tending to the Warren estate, organizing galas like this one, ensuring our name stood tall in Port Haven. Yet here I was, dismissed as the daughter who didn't need anything, my sacrifices erased in a single speech. The injustice burned, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I raised my glass, the wine catching the chandelier's glow. "To new beginnings," I said, my voice clear and deliberate, slicing through the murmurs. Heads turned, unsure if I was sincere or defiant. Celeste's smile flickered, her eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second. She didn't know what I knew. 2 years ago, I'd found the title to the cliffside land in my name, hidden in a safe deposit box left by my mother. I hadn't told a soul, not my father, not my brother Lucas, not even the historical society where I worked. That secret was my shield, and tonight, it became my sword. The gala continued, the crowd buzzing with speculation, their whispers like waves crashing against the cliffs. I stepped onto the balcony, needing air, the ocean's rhythm grounding me. Port Haven, with its weathered docks and lighthouse-crowned cliffs, was more than a town, it was a living archive of our family's history. The Warren estate, a Victorian sprawl perched above the harbor, wasn't just a house, it was a symbol, its land the key to power in this community. Celeste wanted it, not for legacy, but for profit. I'd overheard her months ago at a council meeting, her voice smooth as she pitched a luxury resort to developers, claiming the land would soon be hers. She thought she'd won tonight, but she didn't know I'd been watching, waiting, collecting fragments of truth like the artifacts I catalogued at work. My mind drifted to a memory from 6 months ago, when I'd sat in my cramped office at the Historical Society, surrounded by faded photographs and yellowed ledgers. A donated archive from a local family contained a letter from my mother, gone 20 years now, her handwriting as familiar as the sea. "For Eleanor, my anchor." It read, "Protect what's yours, where the sea meets the stars." It led me to a bank in town, to a safe deposit box untouched since her death. Inside was the deed to the cliffside land, signed over to me when I was 15, along with a note, "This is your power. Guard it." I'd kept it hidden, sensing its weight, knowing it could shift the tides of our family's future. That discovery, tucked away in my office drawer, was why I stood here now, unshaken by my father's words. Back inside, Celeste worked the room, her laughter too bright, her charm a calculated performance. I watched her from the balcony, noting how she leaned into my father, whispering something that made him nod absently. The crowd saw a devoted wife, but I saw the woman who'd hovered at the edges of our lives since I was a teenager, always too close, too eager. My mother had trusted her once, called her a friend, until something changed, something I didn't understand then. Now, I suspected Celeste's devotion was a mask, her love for my father a means to an end. The land wasn't just valuable. It was power, and she craved it. I sipped my wine, letting the cold glass steady my hands. My father's announcement wasn't just a betrayal. It was a declaration of war, and I was ready to fight, not with screams or tears, but with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent years unearthing truths. A woman approached me. Her face familiar from town meetings, Mrs. Callahan, a neighbor who'd known my mother. "Your toast was bold, Eleanor," she said, her tone cautious but curious. Most would have stormed out. I smiled, keeping my voice low. "Storming out doesn't change the truth, Mrs. Callahan." She raised an eyebrow, sensing more beneath my words, but didn't press. Her comment reminded me of the town's eyes on me, their expectations a weight I'd carried since childhood. Port Haven revered the Warrens, but it also judged us, and tonight, I was the daughter betrayed. Yet I felt a spark of something else, resolve, cold and sharp, like the edge of a blade. I excused myself, slipping back into the crowd, catching Celeste's eye across the room. She raised her glass to me, a mocking echo of my toast, but I held her gaze, unblinking. She thought she'd humiliated me, but she'd just lit the fuse. As the gala wound down, I overheard snippets of conversation, locals debating my father's decision, some pitying me, others praising Celeste's grace. My phone buzzed. With notifications, a clip of my toast was already circulating online, captioned Eleanor Warren's defiance at the Seafarers' Gala. The comments were a mix of sympathy and intrigue. She knows something, one read. This isn't over. I pocketed my phone, the viral spark igniting exactly as I'd hoped. Let them talk. Let Celeste think she'd won. I'd spent years piecing together Port Haven's history, learning how to read between lines, how to uncover what others buried. My mother's deed was my first weapon, but it wouldn't be my last. I left the hall, the ocean's roar in my ears, knowing this was only the beginning. Celeste wanted the land, but I held the title, and I'd make sure she never touched it. The next morning, as I walked to my office, I passed the lighthouse that marked Port Haven's heart. Its beam cut through the dawn fog, a reminder of my mother's words, where the sea meets the stars. I'd always thought she meant the cliffs, but now I wondered if there was more, a journal, a letter, something she'd left behind. I needed to find it before Celeste did. My father's betrayal had set this in motion, but I'd finish it, not for revenge, but for the truth. The gala had been Celeste's stage, but Port Haven was mine, and I'd play this game on my terms. The sting of my father's betrayal lingered like salt in a wound, sharp and unyielding, as I stood in the attic of the Warren estate, the air heavy with dust and memory. Sunlight filtered through a cracked window, illuminating stacks of forgotten trunks, their leather cracked like the promises I'd once believed. My mother's words echoed in my mind, protect what's yours, where the sea meets the stars. I'd found the deed to the cliffside land 2 years ago, but now I needed more, something to explain why she'd hidden it, why she'd chosen me. The gala's humiliation, my father's voice handing our legacy to Celeste, had ignited a fire I couldn't douse. I wasn't here to mourn, I was here to uncover the truth, to arm myself against the woman who'd claimed my family's heart. The attic creaked under my steps, each board groaning like it held secrets of its own. I pried open a trunk, its hinges rusted, revealing a jumble of my mother's belongings, faded shawls, a chipped teacup, a photograph of her standing on the cliffs, her smile defiant against the wind. Beneath it all, I found a leather journal, its cover embossed with a lighthouse, Port Haven's emblem. My fingers traced the worn edges, my heart quickening. This was no ordinary keepsake, it was a lifeline. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, the journal open in my lap, my mother's neat handwriting pulling me back 15 years. Celeste was my friend, she wrote, but her envy runs deeper than I feared. She wants the land, not for love, but for power. I've seen her letters to developers, her lies about our family. Edward doesn't see it, but I do. My breath caught. My mother hadn't just protected the land, she'd protected me, knowing Celeste's ambition would one day threaten everything we were. I flipped through the pages, each entry a knife twisting deeper. My mother described how Celeste, then a recent widow, had woven herself into our lives after a hurricane-battered Port Haven. I was 20, shouldering the estate's repairs while my brother chased dreams in Boston. Celeste brought casseroles. Her smiles warm, her presence a balm to my father's grief. But my mother saw through her, noting how Celeste lingered too long, her questions about the land too pointed. One entry chilled me, she spread rumors at the yacht club, claiming the Warrens were selling out. I stopped her, but at what cost? Edward thinks I'm paranoid. My mother had confronted Celeste privately, preserving my father's trust in her friend, but the cost was her silence, her warnings buried in this journal. I clutched the book, my nails digging into the leather. Celeste hadn't just betrayed me, she'd betrayed my mother first, her envy a poison seeping through decades. A floorboard creaked behind me, and I spun, heart pounding. No one was there, just the wind rattling the window. But the sound snapped me back to the present, to the stakes of my discovery. The journal wasn't just a record, it was evidence, a map of Celeste's motives. I tucked it into my bag, my mind racing. My mother's words hinted at more, something about a gift hidden in the estate, beyond the deed. I searched the attic, lifting faded quilts and opening drawers, until I found a small wooden box, its lid carved with a star and wave. Inside was a locket, its silver tarnished but intact, containing a tiny key. No note, no explanation, just the key, its purpose a mystery. I slipped it into my pocket, sensing it was another piece of my mother's puzzle, one I'd need to solve before Celeste could. Downstairs, the estate felt different, its high ceilings and oak paneling no longer a home but a battlefield. I stood in the library, where my mother once read to me, her voice weaving tales of Port Haven sailors. Now, it was where Celeste held court, her plans for a resort tainting the air. I'd overheard her at a council meeting months ago, her voice confident as she pitched the land's future to developers, assuming it was hers. The journal confirmed she'd tried this before, only stopped by my mother's vigilance. I sat at the desk, my fingers brushing a stack of unopened letters. Their envelopes yellowed with age. One caught my eye, addressed to my mother from a local attorney, dated a year before her death. I tore it open, the paper crisp despite its age. It was a confirmation of the deed's transfer to me, with a handwritten note, "Keep this safe. Clara. Celeste knows too much." Clara, my mother's name, felt like a whisper from the grave. The attorney's warning was clear. Celeste had been circling even then, her greed a constant shadow. My phone buzzed, pulling me from the letter. A notification showed a post from the gala, meticulously system, a clip of my toast, now shared across Port Haven's social media. Eleanor's grace under fire, it read, with hundreds of likes and comments. "She's planning something," one said. "Celeste better watch out." The attention was a double-edged sword, amplifying my resolve but tightening the noose around my secrecy. I posted a picture of the journal's lighthouse cover, captioned, "Some truths never fade." Within hours, the post exploded, locals speculating about family secrets, their curiosity a spark I intended to fan. Let them wonder. Let Celeste sweat. I knew the truth, and I'd use it to reclaim what was mine. The memory of the gala returned. Unbidden, my father's announcement, Celeste's smug smile, the crowd's pitying glances. I'd stood tall, but the wound was raw, a betrayal not just of legacy but of love. My mother had seen Celeste's true face, and I'd been blind, trusting her warmth as a child. No more. The journal, the locket, the key, they were my mother's weapons, passed to me. I left the estate, the ocean's roar in my ears, my steps steady. Celeste thought she'd won, but I was just beginning. The cliffside land was mine, and I'd make sure she never touched it. The dining room of the Warren estate felt like a courtroom, its long oak table a barrier between me and the family I'd once trusted. My father sat at the head, his broad shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on a glass of untouched whiskey. Celeste stood behind him, her hand resting possessively on his chair, her smile a polished mask as she poured coffee for my brother Lucas and his wife Margot, who'd just arrived from Boston. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, the fallout from my father's gala announcement still raw. Lucas, his jaw tight, tossed a newspaper onto the table, its headline blaring about the Warren legacy passing to Celeste. "This is a disgrace." He spat, his voice loud enough to rattle the chandelier. "You're giving everything to her?" His outrage seemed genuine, but I caught the glint in his eye, the same one he'd had as a kid when he wanted something for himself. Margot, ever the peacemaker, touched his arm, but her fingers trembled, betraying her unease. I sat across from them, my hands folded, the journal's weight in my bag a silent ally. The room was a stage, and I was done playing the victim. Lucas's outburst wasn't just about the land, it was about his own entitlement, his years of failed ventures in Boston leaving him hungry for a piece of the Warren name. I'd called this meeting to confront the fracture, to gauge who stood where, but their reactions were already telling. My father's silence was a betrayal in itself, his refusal to meet my gaze confirming he'd chosen Celeste over me. "Eleanor? You're strong," he finally said, his voice low, almost pleading. "You don't need the estate. Celeste needs security." The words cut deeper than his public announcement, dismissing my decades of keeping this house standing, of polishing the Warren name while Lucas chased dreams and Celeste schemed. I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the ache. "Strength doesn't erase what I've earned," I said, my eyes locking on Celeste. Her smile didn't waver, but her knuckles whitened on the chair. She thought she'd won, but I was here to shift the board. I pulled a folded paper from my bag. Not the deed, that secret stayed hidden, but a bill I'd found in the estate's office, tucked in a drawer Celeste used for her charity projects. It was an invoice from a private investigator, dated a year ago, listing inquiries about the cliffside land's ownership. I slid it across the table, watching their faces. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my tone calm but sharp, aimed at Celeste. Her eyes flicked to the paper, her composure slipping for a heartbeat before she laughed, light and dismissive. "Oh, Eleanor, that's just routine. I was protecting your father's assets." Lucas snorted, but Margot's gaze darted to Celeste, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing. My father frowned, his fingers tightening on his glass. "What's this about, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. I didn't answer, letting the invoice speak for itself. Celeste had been digging, suspecting the title wasn't my father's to give, long before his announcement. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment betrayal, it was a calculated plan, and I'd just exposed its first thread. The room grew quieter, the tension thick as the fog rolling off Port Haven's cliffs. Lucas grabbed the invoice, his brow furrowing as he read. "You hired someone to snoop on our land?" he asked Celeste, his voice rising. "What were you looking for?" She waved a hand, her rings catching the light. "Just ensuring no one contested Edward's wishes," she said, her tone smooth but her eyes cold. I leaned back, watching her deflect, my mind piecing together the journal's warnings. My mother had seen this coming, her entries about Celeste's envy now ringing true. I didn't need to accuse her outright, the invoice was enough to plant doubt, to make Lucas question his alliance with her. Margot, usually quick to smooth things over, stayed silent, her hands twisting in her lap. I caught her glance, a flicker of guilt, and wondered what she knew. They were all players in this game, but I was the one holding the winning card, even if they didn't know it yet. A memory surfaced, unbidden, from 10 years ago. I was 25, helping my father rebuild after another storm battered the estate. Lucas was gone, chasing some tech startup that crashed within a year. Celeste, newly widowed, was a constant presence, her casseroles and sympathy masking something sharper. I'd overheard her arguing with my father in this very room, her voice low but insistent. "The land could set us up for life, Edward. Why hold on to it?" He'd brushed her off, citing my mother's wishes, but I'd seen the hunger in her eyes, the same hunger I saw now. Back then, I thought it was grief talking, now, I knew it was greed. My mother's journal had confirmed it, her warnings about Celeste's rumors at the yacht club a prelude to this moment. I pushed the memory aside, focusing on the present, on the invoice still lying between us like a loaded gun. I stood, gathering my bag, my movements deliberate. "I'm not here to fight," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "But I won't let our legacy be sold off." Lucas looked up, his anger shifting to curiosity, while Margot's eyes widened, as if she sensed a storm coming. Celeste's smile tightened, her gaze following me as I moved toward the door. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Eleanor," she said, her tone almost maternal, but I caught the edge beneath it. I paused, turning to face her. "Or maybe you've made it too easy," I replied, my words soft but heavy. A challenge she couldn't ignore. My father's head snapped up, his eyes searching mine, but I didn't wait for his response. I left the room, the echo of my footsteps a promise of what was to come. Outside, the cliffs loomed, the ocean crashing below, a reminder of the land at the heart of this war. I pulled out my phone, the gala post still gaining traction, comments piling up about the war and family drama. I added a new one, a photo of the invoice's corner, just enough to show its purpose without revealing too much. "Some legacies are built on secrets," I captioned it, knowing it would spread like wildfire through Port Haven's gossip mill. Within minutes, notifications flooded in, locals speculating about Celeste's motives, their questions a chorus of doubt. What was she hiding? Why the investigator? I let them talk, let the pressure build. The invoice was my first move, a crack in Celeste's facade, but I needed more to bring her down. The journal, the locket, the key, they were pieces of a puzzle my mother had left, and I'd find where they fit before Celeste could claim what was mine. The town was watching, their whispers a tide I could steer. I walked to my car, the salt air sharp in my lungs, my resolve hardening. Celeste thought she'd outmaneuvered me, but I'd been trained by my mother's foresight, by years of unearthing truths in dusty archives. The land was mine, not just by title but by right, and I'd protect it, not with shouts or tears, but with the quiet precision of someone who knew exactly what she was fighting for. The town hall's oak-paneled walls seemed to close in as Celeste stood at the podium, her voice smooth as she proposed a memorial plaque for my father, praising his generous legacy in leaving the Warren estate to her. The crowd, packed with Port Haven's elite, clapped warmly, but their eyes darted to me, seated in the back, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Her words were a calculated jab, painting me as the ungrateful daughter while she basked in the town's approval. The air buzzed with whispers, locals leaning toward each other, their murmurs a mix of pity and judgment. I'd spent years preserving our family's name, yet here I was, sidelined in my own town, my father's silence from the front row a heavier blow than Celeste's speech. Her eyes met mine briefly, a glint of triumph in them, as if she knew the weight of this moment would crush me. But I sat still, my face a mask of calm, the journal's secrets and the investigator's invoice burning in my mind. I wasn't here to break. I was here to build my case. The council meeting was a stage for Port Haven's traditions, where families like ours were both revered and scrutinized. Celeste's proposal wasn't just about a plaque, it was a public claim to the cliffside land, a step toward her resort deal. I'd heard her pitch it months ago, her voice confident as she promised developers millions, assuming the land was hers. Now, she was cementing her narrative, framing herself as the guardian of our legacy. The crowd's applause stung, but it was the whispers that cut deeper, neighbors I'd known since childhood, like Mrs. Callahan, murmuring that I should let it go. Even Sarah, my colleague from the Historical Society, leaned over, her voice low. "Don't make waves, Eleanor. It's not worth it." Her words, meant as advice, felt like another betrayal, echoing the family meeting where Lucas's anger and Margot's silence had left me isolated. But I wasn't alone. I had my mother's journal, the deed, and now, a new piece of evidence I'd found last night. I'd been sorting through my father's old laptop, left untouched in the estate study since he'd upgraded. It was a long shot, but my archivist's instinct drove me to check its forgotten files. Buried in an email folder, I found a message forwarded to Celeste from a developer, offering $5 million for the cliffside land. The date was a month before my father's gala announcement, the subject line blunt: "Confirm ownership and proceed." My heart raced as I read it, the words proof that Celeste hadn't just planned to inherit the land, she'd been negotiating its sale before my father even spoke. The email was a crack in her facade, a link to the investigator's invoice I'd shown Lucas and Margot. She'd been scheming for years, manipulating my father's trust, and now I had her own words to prove it. I saved the email to a drive. My fingers steady despite the anger coiling in my chest. This wasn't just about money, it was about erasing me, my mother, our entire legacy. The memory of that discovery grounded me as Celeste's speech ended, the crowd still clapping. I stood, my movement drawing eyes, and approached the podium for the open comment period. The room hushed, sensing tension. "I admire your dedication to my father's legacy," I said, my voice clear, each word chosen with care. "But legacies are built on truth, not promises." The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. Celeste's smile tightened, her fingers clutching the podium's edge. "What are you implying, Eleanor?" she asked, her tone sweet but sharp, a challenge disguised as concern. I didn't take the bait. "Just that history matters," I replied, my eyes holding hers. "The Warrens have always honored what's real." My father shifted in his seat, his face pale, while Lucas, sitting nearby, raised an eyebrow, his earlier anger now tinged with curiosity. Margot avoided my gaze, her hands twisting in her lap, a sign she knew more than she'd admitted at the family meeting. A flashback hit me, sharp and vivid, from 12 years ago. I was 23, helping my mother organize a town fundraiser. At this very hall. Celeste, then a new fixture in our lives, had cornered her during a break, her voice low but insistent. "Clara, the land could transform Port Haven. Why hold it back?" My mother's response was calm but firm. "It's not about money, Celeste. It's about who we are." I'd thought little of it then, assuming it was just talk, but now, reading her journal, I knew my mother had caught Celeste forging a letter to a developer, claiming the land was for sale. She'd stopped her, keeping it from my father to protect him, but the betrayal had haunted her. That memory, paired with the email, confirmed Celeste's greed wasn't new, it was a pattern, one I was now unraveling. Back in the present, the council chair called for order, but the room buzzed with speculation. I returned to my seat, feeling the weight of every stare. Sarah leaned over again, her voice barely a whisper. "That was bold, Eleanor. Be careful." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, calculating my next move. The email was damning, but I needed more to expose Celeste fully. The locket and key from my mother's box nagged at me, their purpose still unclear, but I sensed they held another piece of her plan. I left the hall, the ocean's roar outside a steady pulse, and checked my phone. The gala post had grown, but my cryptic comment from the family meeting, about secrets and legacies, was now viral, with locals sharing it alongside clips of my council speech. "Eleanor's fighting back," one comment read. "What's Celeste hiding?" The question hung in the air, a spark I'd fanned into a flame. As I walked to my car, I passed the lighthouse, its beam cutting through the dusk. My mother's words, "Where the sea meets the stars," felt like a guide, pointing to something beyond the deed. The email was my weapon, but I needed to wield it carefully. Celeste's confidence was her weakness, she thought I was broken, but I was building a case, piece by piece. My father's silence, Lucas's wavering loyalty, Margot's guilt, they were all cracks I could widen. I'd show Port Haven the truth, not with tears or screams, but with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent years unearthing what others buried. The land was mine, and Celeste would learn that soon enough. The lawyer's office smelled of old books and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the salt-soaked air of Port Haven's cliffs, but it was here that Celeste chose to strike. She stood at the center of the room, flanked by my father, her tailored suit pristine as she presented a yellow document to Mr. Hargrove, the family attorney. "Edward transferred the cliffside land to me years ago," she declared, her voice steady, her eyes daring anyone to challenge her. The paper, creased and official-looking, bore my father's signature, dated 5 years before my mother's death. My brother Lucas leaned forward in his chair, his jaw tight, while Margot, beside him, stared at the floor, her hands knotted in her lap. My father's face was unreadable, his gaze fixed on the desk, as if the weight of his own signature crushed him. The room felt like a trap, the walls closing in as Celeste's lie hung in the air, a brazen attempt to rewrite history. I stood by the window, my arms crossed, the journal's secrets and the developer's email burning in my mind. She thought this would break me, but I was ready to turn her weapon against her. The meeting was meant to settle the estate's future, a formality after the gala's shock, but Celeste had turned it into a battlefield. Mr. Hargrove, a graying man with a penchant for precision, examined the document, his brow furrowing. "This predates Clara's passing," he said, glancing at my father. "Why wasn't it filed?" Celeste's smile was seamless, her tone almost mournful. "Edward wanted it kept private, for family harmony." Her words dripped with false sincerity, painting my father as a man protecting his wife's memory while she claimed his legacy. Lucas snorted, his voice low but sharp. "Harmony? You're rewriting our family story." Margot shot him a look, her eyes wide with warning, but I caught something else in her expression, guilt, flickering like a shadow. My father said nothing, his silence louder than any protest, confirming he was still under Celeste's spell. The room's tension was a living thing, coiling around us, but I kept my face calm, my voice steady. "Interesting timing," I said, stepping forward, my eyes on Celeste. 5 years before my mother died? That doesn't add up. I pulled my mother's journal from my bag, its leather cover worn but weighty, and opened it to a marked page. "My mother wrote about the land in her final years," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the room's hush. "She noted every legal step, every transfer. There's no mention of this document." I held up the journal, letting the weight of her handwriting challenge Celeste's claim. The dates didn't align. My mother's entries from that year detailed her fight to secure the land for me, not my father's supposed gift to Celeste. Mr. Hargrove adjusted his glasses, peering at the journal, then back at the document. "This is unusual," he said, his tone cautious but pointed. Celeste's smile faltered, her fingers twitching at her side. "Clara wasn't always aware of Edward's decisions," she said, her voice sharp now, a crack in her composure. Lucas leaned back, his eyes narrowing, while Margot's hands tightened, her knuckles white. I didn't need to say more. The journal's truth was enough to sow doubt, to make Celeste's lie tremble. The moment felt like a standoff, each of us measuring the other's resolve. I'd spent the past week cross-referencing my mother's entries with town records, my archivist skills unearthing inconsistencies. The document Celeste presented was pristine, too pristine for something supposedly a decade old. Its ink was sharp, the paper unyellowed at the edges, unlike the brittle pages in my mother's journal. I didn't accuse her outright, not yet. Instead, I let the discrepancy hang, a silent challenge. "My mother was meticulous," I said, my tone even, my eyes locked on Celeste. "She'd have known if my father signed anything away." My father's head snapped up, a flicker of pain in his eyes, as if my words stirred a memory he'd buried. Lucas shifted, his earlier anger now tinged with doubt, while Margot's gaze darted between us, her silence louder than words. Celeste recovered quickly, her laugh light but strained. "Eleanor, you're clinging to the past," she said, her tone patronizing. "This is about the future." I smiled, cold and deliberate. "The past has a way of catching up." A memory flooded back, sharp and unbidden, from 15 years ago. I was 20, helping my mother sort through estate papers in the library. She'd been quiet that day, her hands trembling as she read a letter from a developer, offering millions for the land. "Celeste suggested we consider it," she'd said, her voice heavy. "But this is ours, Eleanor. Yours." I hadn't understood then, thinking it was just business, but now I saw the truth in her journal. Celeste had planted the idea, testing my mother's resolve, only to be rebuffed. That rejection had fueled her long game, leading to this moment, this forged document. I pushed the memory aside, focusing on the present, on the weight of the locket and key in my pocket. They were still a mystery, but I sensed they'd unlock more than just secrets, they'd unlock Celeste's downfall. The meeting ended with no resolution, Mr. Hargrove promising to verify the document's authenticity. As we left, the town hall steps were crowded with locals, their whispers a chorus of speculation. My earlier posts, about the gala, the investigator's invoice, my cryptic council comment, had turned Port Haven's gossip mill into a storm. I pulled out my phone, uploading a photo of the journal's open page, just the date and my mother's handwriting visible, captioned, "Truth doesn't fade." Within minutes, comments flooded in. "What's Celeste hiding? Eleanor's fighting for her mom." The post went viral, locals sharing it with fervor, their questions a tide I was steering. Sarah, lingering nearby, caught my eye. "You're stirring something big," she said, her voice low, almost nervous. "Just be careful." I nodded. But my mind was on the document's flaw, the journal's truth, and the key in my pocket. Celeste thought she'd outplayed me, but I was closing in. As I walked to my car, the cliffs loomed in the distance, the ocean's roar a steady pulse. My mother's words, "Where the sea meets the stars," echoed, a clue I hadn't yet cracked. The forged document was Celeste's boldest move, but it was also her mistake. I'd use it, along with the email and invoice, to unravel her lies. My father's silence, Lucas's wavering loyalty, Margot's guilt, they were pieces I could move. The land was mine, not just by title but by right, and I'd protect it with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent years unearthing truths others thought buried forever. The Port Haven Yacht Club glittered under the evening sky, its chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crowd gathered for the annual Maritime Gala, but the air felt sharp with betrayal as Margot pulled me aside, her voice trembling with a confession that shattered the facade of family loyalty. I helped Celeste forge the document, she whispered, her eyes darting to where Celeste stood, charming the town's elite with a glass of champagne in hand. The words hit like a wave crashing against the cliffs, exposing a new layer of deceit in a family already fractured by my father's choices. Lucas stood nearby, oblivious, laughing with a council member, while my father lingered at the bar, his shoulders hunched, avoiding my gaze. The gala, a cornerstone of Port Haven's social calendar, was meant to celebrate our seafaring heritage, but tonight it was a stage for truths to unravel. I kept my expression neutral, the weight of my mother's journal and the locket in my purse grounding me. Margot's admission was a crack in Celeste's armor, and I was ready to pry it open. The yacht club's polished floors and nautical decor, brass compasses and weathered ship wheels, felt like a mockery of the legacy I was fighting for. Margot's hands twisted together, her usual poise replaced by a nervous edge. "I didn't want to, Eleanor," she said, her voice low, barely audible over the crowd's chatter. "Celeste promised us a share of the resort profits. I thought it was safe." Her confession confirmed what I'd suspected since the lawyer's office. Celeste's forged document wasn't her work alone. Margot's involvement stung, not just as a betrayal but as a reminder of how far my family had drifted. Lucas, my brother, had been swayed by the same promise, his greed blinding him to the cost. I met Margot's eyes, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "You thought forging our legacy was safe?" I asked, my words sharp but quiet, meant for her alone. She flinched, her gaze dropping, but I saw something else, relief, as if confessing had lifted a weight she couldn't carry. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Why tell me now?" Margot glanced at Celeste, who was now laughing with the mayor, her charm a calculated performance. "She's planning to file the document next week," Margot said, her words rushed. "I saw the notary stamp, it's fake, but it's convincing." I couldn't stay silent anymore. Her admission was a lifeline, a chance to turn Celeste's lie against her, but it also shifted the game. Margot, the woman who'd stood by Lucas's schemes, was now offering herself as an ally, her guilt a wedge I could use. I nodded, my mind racing, cataloging her words like the artifacts I handled at work. The forged document, the investigators' invoice, the developer's email, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Margot's confession was the key to unlocking it. But I didn't trust her fully. Her ambition still lingered, a shadow I'd need to watch. A memory surfaced, sharp and vivid, from 10 years ago. I was 25, helping my mother at this very gala, her smile strained as she greeted Celeste. Then a fixture in our lives. I'd overheard them in a quiet corner, my mother's voice firm. "Stop pushing, Celeste. The land stays with us." Celeste had laughed, brushing it off, but her eyes had been cold, calculating. Later, my mother confided in me, her voice heavy with worry. "She's not who she seems, Eleanor. Protect what's yours." That warning, echoed in her journal, had guided me to the deed, the locket, and now this moment. Margot's confession was proof my mother's fears were real, her foresight a shield I carried into this fight. I pushed the memory aside, focusing on the present, on the woman before me who'd just handed me a weapon. The gala's noise faded as I considered my next move. Anna Reed, a childhood friend and lawyer, approached, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "Trouble brewing?" she asked. Her tone light but probing. I'd known Anna since we were kids, racing along the cliffs, but her legal mind was what I needed now. "More than you know," I said, glancing at Margot, who'd slipped back into the crowd, her confession still ringing in my ears. Anna raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight of my words. "If you've got evidence, I can help," she said, her voice low. "But you need to move fast." I nodded, the locket's key pressing against my hip, its purpose still a mystery but its presence a reminder of my mother's plan. Anna's offer was a spark, a chance to solidify my case, but I'd need more than Margot's words to bury Celeste's lies. I excused myself, stepping onto the balcony, the ocean's roar a steady pulse below. The town was watching, their whispers. Fueled by my posts, the gala speech, the journal page, the cryptic hint about secrets. I pulled out my phone, uploading a photo of the locket, its star-enwave engraving catching the moonlight. Some keys unlock more than doors, I captioned it, knowing it would ignite Port Haven's curiosity. Within minutes, comments flooded. What does Eleanor know? Is this about the land? The post went viral, locals sharing it with fervor, their questions a tide I was steering. Anna joined me, her gaze on the horizon. You're playing a dangerous game, she said. Her tone half admiring, half wary. Just playing the hand I was dealt, I replied, my voice cold, my resolve ironclad. The question hung unspoken, how far would I go to protect what was mine? The gala continued, but I felt the shift, Margot's confession, Anna's offer. The town's growing doubt. Celeste thought she'd cornered me with her forged document, but she'd underestimated the weight of truth. My father's silence, Lucas's greed, Margot's guilt, they were threads I could pull. The land was mine, not just by title but by right, and I'd protect it with the precision of someone who'd spent years unearthing what others buried. As I walked back inside, Celeste's eyes met mine across the room, her smile faltering for a heartbeat. She sensed the tide turning, and I was ready to let it crash. The Warren Estates library felt like a tomb as Lucas slumped in a leather chair, his confession slicing through the silence like a blade. Celeste promised me a cut of the resort deal if I backed her claim to the land. His words, heavy with guilt, hung in the air, a raw betrayal that deepened the chasm between us. My father stood by the fireplace, his face ashen, his hands gripping the mantel as if to steady himself against the weight of his son's admission. Celeste, seated across from me, maintained her polished composure, her eyes narrowing slightly, but her smile never wavered. The room, with its towering bookshelves and faded nautical maps, was a shrine to our family's legacy, yet it was here that Lucas revealed he'd traded it for a promise of profit. I stood near the window, the ocean's distant roar a reminder of what I was fighting for, my mother's journal and the locket's key heavy in my bag. This was no longer just about Celeste's schemes. My brother's greed had made him her pawn, and I was done letting them rewrite my family's story. The meeting was my doing, a calculated move to confront Lucas after Margot's confession at the gala. I'd asked Anna to join us, her legal mind a quiet strength at my side, her notebook open as she jotted down every word. Lucas's admission came after I pressed him, my voice calm but unrelenting, about his sudden support for Celeste's plans. You were quick to defend her at the family meeting, I said, my eyes locked on his. What changed? He'd avoided my gaze, his fingers drumming on the chair's arm, until the truth spilled out. She said the land was a done deal. He muttered, his voice low, almost broken. $1 million, Eleanor. I needed it. Margot, sitting beside him, looked away, her earlier betrayal now overshadowed by her husband's. My father's silence was deafening, his refusal to speak. A confirmation of his complicity, letting Celeste pull the strings while he stood by. I felt the sting of their choices, but my resolve was iron, forged by years of holding this family together. Celeste leaned forward, her voice smooth as she tried to steer the conversation. Lucas is mistaken, she said, her tone almost pitying. I only wanted what's best for the family. Her lie was a masterclass in manipulation, but I saw through it, and so did Anna. Best for the family? I asked, my voice cold, my hand resting on my bag, where the journal held my mother's warnings. Or best for your bank account? Anna raised an eyebrow, her pen pausing, while Lucas shifted uncomfortably, his confession now a chain around him. Margot's eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of regret in them, her earlier alliance with me a fragile thread I wasn't sure I could trust. The room crackled with tension, each of us a player in a game where the stakes were our family's soul. I pulled out the investigator's invoice and the developer's email, laying them on the table like evidence in a trial. You promised Lucas a cut, I said, my gaze fixed on Celeste. Just like you planned to sell the land before my father's announcement. The air shifted, the weight of my words landing like a stone. Lucas's head snapped up, his eyes wide as he stared at the papers. You told me it was after the gala, he said, his voice rising, aimed at Celeste. You said it was Edward's idea. My father flinched, his knuckles white on the mantel, but he didn't speak. Celeste's smile tightened, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. You're twisting things, Eleanor, she said, her voice sharp now, a crack in her facade. Anna leaned forward, her voice measured but cutting. The dates don't lie, Celeste. This email predates Edward's decision. The room fell silent, the truth a blade I'd sharpened with every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Lucas's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a symptom of Celeste's poison, seeping through our family for years. I didn't need to shout or cry, my calm was my weapon, and I wielded it with precision. A memory flashed, vivid and painful, from 12 years ago. I was 23, helping my mother at the estate, her hand steady as she showed me a ledger of family assets. "This land is our heart," she'd said, her voice firm. "Celeste will try to take it. Don't let her." I'd thought she was being cautious, maybe paranoid, but her journal later revealed she'd caught Celeste forging a letter to a developer, a precursor to the document I'd faced in the lawyer's office. That moment, her warning, had planted the seed of my fight, guiding me to the deed, the locket, and now this confrontation. I pushed the memory aside, focusing on Lucas's face, his guilt a mirror to my own pain. He'd chosen money over family, but his confession was a crack I could widen, a chance to turn him against Celeste. Anna spoke again, her voice steady. "If Lucas testifies, it strengthens our case," she said, glancing at me. "The forged document won't hold." I nodded, my mind racing, cataloging the pieces: Margot's admission, the email, the invoice, and now Lucas's truth. The locket's key, still a mystery, felt heavier, as if it held the final answer. I turned to my father, his silence a wound I couldn't ignore. "You let this happen," I said, my voice low, not accusing but stating a fact. He met my eyes for the first time, pain flickering in them, but he said nothing. Celeste stood, her composure fraying. "This is pointless," she said, moving toward the door. "You're tearing this family apart, Eleanor." I stepped into her path, my voice like ice. "No, Celeste. You did that." As she left, the room felt lighter, as if her presence had been a storm cloud. I stayed behind, the ocean's roar filtering through the window, a reminder of what I was protecting. My phone buzzed, the gala post about the locket still gaining traction, locals speculating about Eleanor's key and Celeste's secrets. I uploaded a new post, a photo of the estate's library window, the cliffs visible in the distance, captioned, "Some promises break families. Others save them." The comments exploded, "Eleanor's fighting for the truth. What did Lucas do?" The town's curiosity was a tide I was steering, each post a spark in the growing fire. Anna touched my arm, her voice low. "You're close, but be careful. Celeste won't stop." I nodded, my resolve unshaken. The question lingered, unspoken: could I forgive the family that betrayed me, or was revenge my only path? The cliffs loomed outside, their rugged edges a mirror to my determination. Celeste thought she'd won, but Lucas's confession, Margot's shift, Anna's support, they were weapons I'd forged from their mistakes. The land was mine, by right and by blood, and I'd protect it with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent years unearthing truths others thought buried forever. The Port Haven Historical Society's archive room was a sanctuary of dust and secrets, but it became a battlefield when my father, his voice breaking, admitted he'd known about Celeste's plans to sell the cliffside land and did nothing to stop her. His confession, delivered in the dim light of flickering bulbs, hit like a betrayal sharper than any before, stripping away the last shred of trust I'd clung to. Sarah, my colleague, stood frozen beside a stack of leather-bound ledgers, her eyes wide as she clutched a faded envelope she'd just handed me. Celeste wasn't there, her absence a calculated retreat, but her shadow loomed over us, her schemes exposed by Lucas and Margot now echoed by my father's guilt. The archive, a place where I'd spent years preserving our town's history, was now the stage for dismantling my family's lies. I stood among the shelves, the locket's key in my pocket, my mother's journal under my arm, my resolve a quiet fire. This was the moment I'd been building toward, and I would not falter. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and ink, the weight of history pressing down as my father's words sank in. "I thought it would secure her future," he said. His voice barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't know she'd go this far." His admission was a gut punch, not just for its truth but for what it revealed about his weakness, his willingness to let Celeste erase my mother's legacy. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening on the envelope, its wax seal cracked but intact, bearing my mother's handwriting. "I found this in the maritime records," she said, her voice hesitant, as if sensing the storm brewing. "It's addressed to you, Eleanor." I took the envelope, my heart pounding, knowing it was another piece of my mother's plan, a breadcrumb leading to the truth I'd been chasing. My father's eyes followed the envelope, a flicker of recognition in them, but he said nothing. His silence a familiar wound. I opened the envelope, revealing a letter dated a year before my mother's death. Her words were steady, deliberate. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, you've found the key. The land is yours, always was. Check. The lighthouse vault." The letter trembled in my hands, not from fear but from the weight of her foresight. The lighthouse vault, a place I hadn't visited since I was a child, racing with Anna along the cliffs, was where the locket's key belonged. My mother had hidden something there, something that would seal Celeste's defeat. I looked at my father, his face pale, his hands shaking. "You knew about this?" I asked, my voice low, each word a blade. He nodded, a single, defeated motion. "Clara told me she'd protected the land, but I I let Celeste convince me it was hers to claim. His confession was a crack in the foundation of our family, exposing how deeply Celeste's manipulation had taken root. Sarah stepped back, her role as the unwitting messenger complete, but her presence anchored me. I'd asked her to search the archives for anything tied to the Warren estate, a long shot that had paid off. The letter was a lifeline, but it also shifted the game. My father's admission wasn't just guilt, it was proof he'd been complicit, choosing Celeste's promises over my mother's wishes. I turned to Anna, who joined us, her legal pad ready, her eyes sharp. "This changes everything," she said, her voice steady. "If the lighthouse vault holds the original deed, Celeste's forged document is worthless." I nodded, my mind racing, piecing together the puzzle: Lucas's greed, Margot's betrayal, the investigator's invoice, the developer's email, and now this letter. The key in my pocket felt alive, its Staranwave engraving a map to my mother's final act of defiance. A memory surged, vivid and piercing, from 15 years ago. I was 20, standing with my mother at the lighthouse, the wind whipping her hair as she pointed to the horizon. "Where the sea meets the stars, Eleanor," she'd said, her voice soft but fierce. "That's where we keep what matters." I'd thought it was poetry, a mother's whimsy, but now I understood. The lighthouse vault, hidden behind a locked panel, was her safe, a place to guard the truth from Celeste's grasp. Her journal had hinted at it, her words a code I was only now deciphering. I pushed the memory aside, focusing on the present, on the envelope in my hand and the key in my pocket. My father's confession and Sarah's find were the final pieces I needed to end this war. I left the archive, Anna at my side, the ocean's roar louder as we approached the cliffs. My father stayed behind, his guilt a weight he'd have to carry alone. I pulled out my phone, the town's whispers already swirling from my last post about the library window. I uploaded a photo of the letter's seal, its cracked wax stark against the envelope's yellowed paper, captioned, "Some truths are buried, but they always rise." The comments exploded within minutes. "Eleanor's got something big. What's in the lighthouse?" Port Haven was hooked, their curiosity a tide-eyed harnessed, each post a step toward exposing Celeste. Anna glanced at my phone, her voice low. "You're rewriting the narrative," she said, a hint of admiration in her tone. "Just telling the truth," I replied, my voice cold, my heart steady. The unspoken question lingered: could I reclaim my family's legacy without losing myself? As we reached the lighthouse, its beam cutting through the dusk, I felt the weight of every step I'd taken: the gala, the lawyer's office, the confessions. Celeste thought she'd outplayed me, but my mother's foresight, Lucas's greed, Margot's guilt, and my father's weakness were all threads I'd woven into a net. The land was mine, not just by title but by blood, and I'd unlock its truth with the precision of someone who'd spent years unearthing what others buried. The vault waited, and with it, the final piece to end Celeste's game. The lighthouse's rusted vault door groaned as I turned the key, revealing a metal box engraved with my mother's initials, its contents, a single letter and the original deed, shattering every assumption about our family's legacy with the revelation that she'd bought the cliffside land with her own money, meant solely for me. The wind howled outside, the beam of Port Haven's lighthouse slicing through the dawn, as I stood alone in the stone chamber, the weight of my mother's foresight pressing against my chest. Celeste's schemes, my father's silence, Lucas's greed, and Margot's betrayal had all led to this moment, where the truth I'd fought for lay in my hands. Anna waited outside, her legal mind ready to wield this final blow, while Sarah, who'd uncovered the letter's clue, stood by the cliff's edge, her role in this victory quiet but profound. The town hall loomed in the distance, where today's meeting would seal Celeste's defeat, but the real battle had been won here, in the shadows of my mother's plan. I clutched the deed, its ink faded but unyielding, and prepared to end this war with the precision I'd honed over months of pain and strategy. The vault's damp air clung to me as I opened the letter, its pages crisp despite years of hiding. My mother's handwriting was steady, her words a testament to her strength. "Eleanor, I bought the land with my inheritance, not your father's. It's yours, to protect our name from those who'd sell it." The deed, dated before Celeste entered our lives, bore only my mother's name, a legal fortress that nullified every claim Celeste had staked. The revelation was a blade, cutting through years of manipulation, exposing the lie that the land was ever my father's to give. I'd spent months unearthing evidence: the investigator's invoice, the developer's email, the forged document, Lucas's confession, Margot's shift, my father's guilt, but this was the final piece, the one that rewrote our story. My mother hadn't just protected the land. She'd protected me, knowing Celeste's ambition would try to erase us both. I stepped outside, the ocean's roar a steady pulse, and handed the deed to Anna. Her eyes scanned it, a slow smile spreading. "This is airtight," she said, her voice firm. "Celeste's document is dead." Sarah joined us, her gaze on the horizon, her quiet support a reminder of the allies I'd gained. The town hall meeting was hours away, but I could already see Celeste's face, her polished mask crumbling as I presented the deed. My father would be there, his silence no longer a shield, and Lucas and Margot, their betrayals exposed, would face the consequences of their choices. I'd called the meeting, backed by Anna's legal filings, to challenge Celeste's claim publicly, knowing the town's eyes would be on us. Port Haven's gossip mill, fueled by my posts, was already buzzing, the lighthouse photo and cryptic captions sparking theories about Eleanor's truth. The town hall was packed, the air thick with anticipation as I stood at the podium, the deed and letter in hand. Celeste sat in the front row, her smile tight, her eyes darting to the crowd, sensing their shift. My father sat beside her, his face pale, while Lucas and Margot lingered at the back, their heads bowed. I didn't look at them, my focus on the room, on the neighbors and council members who'd watched this drama unfold. The cliffside land was never my father's to give, I said, my voice clear, each word a stone in the wall I was building. My mother bought it, for me. I held up the deed, its authenticity verified by Anna's team, and read from the letter, my mother's words echoing through the hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd, whispers rising as Celeste's composure cracked, her hands gripping her chair. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp but unsteady. "You're fabricating history." I met her gaze, my own unwavering. History speaks for itself. The council chair, Mr. Hargrove, took the deed, his eyes narrowing as he confirmed its legitimacy. "This changes everything," he said, his voice carrying the weight of finality. The crowd erupted, some clapping, others murmuring, their loyalty shifting to me, to the truth. Celeste stood, her face flushed, and stormed out, her exit a silent admission of defeat. My father remained, his eyes meeting mine for a moment, filled with regret but no words. Lucas and Margot slipped away, their roles in the saga exposed, their futures uncertain. Anna stood beside me, her presence a steady anchor, while Sarah, in the crowd, nodded quietly, her part in uncovering the letter a spark that had ignited this victory. The town's whispers turned to cheers, a wave of support that drowned out months of doubt. I stepped outside, the cliffs stretching before me, the ocean's roar a hymn to my mother's legacy. I posted one final photo, a shot of the deed's corner, my mother's signature visible, captioned, "Some legacies are written in ink, not promises." The comments flooded in, Eleanor won. The Warrens are back. Port Haven embraced the truth, their shares and posts a testament to the story's power. The question lingered, unspoken. Could I heal the wounds this fight had left, or was closure enough? I stood by the lighthouse, the key in my hand, its purpose fulfilled, and felt the weight of my journey settle into something new, not peace, but strength. Looking back, I see a path carved through betrayal, each step a choice to stand firm where others faltered. My father's silence, Lucas's greed, Margot's complicity, Celeste's lies, they were not just obstacles but mirrors, reflecting the cost of trust placed in the wrong hands. The lesson isn't forgiveness or vengeance, it's the cold truth. That family can wound you deeper than strangers, and protecting what's yours means knowing who you are. My mother taught me that, not with words but with a deed hidden in a vault, a letter sealed against time. To those who felt the sting of being cast aside in their own homes, I say this: you are not defined by their choices. Gather your evidence, hold your ground, and fight with the quiet force of truth. It's stronger than their lies. The cliffs of Port Haven are mine, not because I won, but because I never stopped digging for what was real. If this story moved you, join me for the next one. Subscribe to the channel and let's uncover more truths together.